Hey, hey, everybody. Um, Doing a little bit of a stream here, obviously, with the news. Try to set the shot up a little bit. Um, Tonight, at between 9 and 10, we're going to do another more in depth response with everybody, with Matt and David, the whole team, to talk about Bernie dropping out, what comes next. At 6 o'clock, I'll be on the Jacobin channel. Go to subscribe to the Jacobin YouTube channel, talking with the great busker, Sankara, about what happened. I always have to say hello. While you're here, you got to smash the like button. And if you haven't yet, you got to click subscribe. Very, very important stuff. If you're in a position right now to go to patreon.com/TMBS, become a patron. And while you're watching it, smash the like button and hit subscribe. We've got 164 people and only 49 likes. Let's up that like. I'm extremely competitive. Um, Guys, obviously this is a sad day. It really sucks. I'll confess that I already sort of went through this process, several weeks ago. This campaign was basically over. Thank you, Kennedy. Was basically over on Super Tuesday, a couple of weeks ago, and definitely over after Michigan. And there was some great moves by the Bernie campaign. Some of the teach-ins were really good. Obviously, the policy that they were advocating for with Corona was really positive. But the campaign was over, in terms of reality, in terms of what would happen. And now we've got to dissect everything, strategize, and move forward, but also, hold space that there's grief here. There's a lot of grief. This is a really, really, really intense time. Uh, there's a pandemic. People are losing family members. There is, we have this obscene, grotesque administration leading us. We have a completely failed opposition party. And then we had this very decent man and this very inspiring campaign that has done a lot of good, not at the end be able to meet the moment. So it's okay to kind of feel that, right? And people go to different places emotionally. Some people get really depressed, some people are getting pissed off. All those are valid emotions. Some people feel a lot of anxiety. Um, and people are going to need to work on where they're at in their own different ways. And obviously I've been sort of talking more on the show about some of the spiritual and contemplative dimensions of things. Melancholy is one. As always, if you want, of course you can, feel free to hit the super chats. It does help. But I'm going to give you just a little bit of my kind of big picture first responses to this in a second. Your thoughts on the supposed succession issue on the left, e.g., Hugo Chavez or Mandela. I'm somewhat fearful if there is a proper successor to Bernie. I don't think there's a successor to Bernie yet. I think those are really different scenarios. I think in Venezuela, obviously, we don't have anybody equivalent to. Thank you for being one of the few in independent media who's not bashing Bernie. I've got criticisms of Bernie. We need to be honest about Bernie. But Bernie's a very good person who did a lot of incredible things for our politics over the last 5 years. And it would be petulant and immature, I think, to not acknowledge that. Thanks for everything. Feeling down. I totally get it. It's okay. So to feel down, that makes sense. Hugo Chavez and Nelson Mandela are extraordinary leaders. There's really different scenarios there. Maduro is somebody who is, chosen to kind of carry on. He had a huge amount of loyalty to the Bolivarian Revolution. And I think in many respects, we cannot really properly assess Maduro. Like, the main action in Venezuela is the U.S. war and attempts at regime change on Venezuela. Interestingly, in the ANC, in some ways, the ANC, there's a bigger democratic process there. I mean, Thabo Mbeki actually outmaneuvered Cyril Ramaphosa, who's the current South African president. Ramaphosa was Mandela's chosen successor. But I think that kind of twofold answer to that is a broader cultivation of political talent that needs to happen. And we actually can learn from movements like the ANC. And then also that, um, we need to think beyond this kind of narrow notion of a figurehead. I'm up at 4:45 a.m. for this. I worry about my NYC fam every day. Please stay safe. Get yourselves Medicare for all, one way or another, please. Oh man, are we going to keep fighting for it? And thank you so much and blessings back. So, big picture, guys, here's what I would say. I think the bottom line is, and this is where we have to really credit Bernie Sanders and the campaign and this struggle that specifically was centered around Sanders for the last 5 years, that I think, by the way, many times people did not realize the stakes of. I think that, frankly, uh, there was, especially a year ago, with all of that bullshit about pushing him to the left and all of that fucking nonsense, people were not really sitting back and realizing the incredibly unique merits and opportunity of the Sanders campaign and the fact that Sanders, in many ways, had really proven himself. And so, Bernie Sanders, both in 2016 and in 2020, has put huge issues on the table. He centered things we need, like Medicare for all, like a global Green New Deal. Most importantly, I think overall, injected class consciousness into politics, while also being a strong voice for the rights and the humanity of refugees and immigrant populations. He's also been a broad and clear advocate of equity across all categories, and somebody who has made some real moves in foreign policy. I'll get to this question in a second, and thank you. So we got to acknowledge all of that. I think the big problem, though, is that there was not a figuring out from the beginning of a synthesis between a structural change campaign and the fact that a lot of the Democratic Party is not oriented that way politically. With the overturned window significantly shifted on the left, should someone run a more scorched earth campaign in 2024 to take advantage of the work Bernie put in? Yes and no. I don't think scorched earth works in the Democratic primary in the same way. Again, I think the paradox of the Bernie campaign is actually way more normie language, way more centrist messaging, with actually a willingness to be infinitely more ruthless and brutal in terms of actual politics. So a less revolution talk, but much more willingness to drop the oppo on Elizabeth Warren out of the gate and talk about how absolutely dangerous Biden would be as a nominee. Today I'm going to be sad. Tomorrow I'll stay angry. It's hard to fight when everyone has to stay home, though. Act up where we're able to get out on the streets, we can. Well, first of all, we will definitely be able to get back on the streets. And we cannot allow us to be distant and isolated to be normalized. Obviously, right now we need to fight off this pandemic. We need to practice social isolation. We need to be incredibly safe. But we also cannot allow this to be a habit. That is actually a real fulfillment of neoliberal hyper alienation, and we cannot feed that. Bernie didn't fail. Our education system failed us again, combined with free speech, which is great, but has consequences, easy to lie and brainwash. Well, free speech isn't the problem. Free speech is actually essential for our project, and we need to vigorously have the confidence and the robustness to support free speech. But at the same time, I agree with you. There is a decades-long process of brainwashing and propaganda that has really hurt. Hey, Michael, love the show. I think we should put all of our energy into Medicare for all. I think that's the best policy to galvanize the left. I think the most important thing right now are strikes and building an institutional basis for reviving labor politics in this country, because labor politics are the essential thing. It needs to be mass. It needs to be a politics that is mainstream and broad and centers the vast majority of people in their immediate material needs, and then builds shared values out from that. 965 people watching, 225 likes. Come on, folks, smash the like button now, smash the like button now. And of course, if you haven't yet, click subscribe and go through our archive. Watch our illicit history documentaries. That will really help you get up to speed as to where we are in the moment. I think, but I also think, yes, as far as Medicare for all, I think Bernie should keep all of his organizers on staff. I think that people should stay on payroll. And I think that it's really, really, really important to uh, keep going. And I think that fight specifically right now should take the form of a fight for Medicare for all. Do you think the Tara Reid thing is worth pursuing? I don't know what you mean by that. I mean, I think the press should investigate it and cover it. I think in the context of knocking Biden off politically, no. I mean, obviously not in not in the primary. It's an important story and needs to be covered. And I think also, there's a lot of lessons there about the various dynamics of kind of liberal politics and how these things have been deployed. But it's obviously it's something that should be and will be investigated, and he should respond to. I think politically, obviously not a Democratic primary. Will it, is it, would it turn around the momentum? We can talk all about all the good he did, but did acknowledge that he didn't want to win this election or the last, just sift conversation. We need more. I don't know about that. I can't get into the psychology of what he did or didn't want to do, but I do know that it would need to be a lot more strategic and a lot more aggressive. Now, the paradox is I think that in some of the ways in which it would need to be much more strategic would be in ways that the left is not necessarily comfortable with. We need to have a mass message, and that might sound like being more moderate, frankly, not on policy primarily, but on approach to a broader base of voters. So I don't think it's about Bernie not wanting it, but I think that there were a lot of people, and frankly, too committed to their sort of comfort zones more so than winning. What the F is wrong with Jimmy D is so frigging self-serving for those who aren't as politically astute as yourself. Whatever good points are buried under his silly anger should be highlighted. Honestly, guys, I am just not up on Jimmy Dore right now. I don't know what to say. I've criticized him many times in the past. I do not backtrack on those criticisms. I think the anger part makes a hell of a lot of sense. There's a lot to be angry and disgusted by, but I look at politics very differently, and I just don't, I'm not up on it. I thought in this election cycle he was super obsessed with Tulsi. I thought that was his thing, and it seems to me that he'd already been very pissed about Bernie for a while. Yes, I think, again, the people that I talk to and the people that I cite are the people that I'm engaging with, right? Love your Kali image in the background. We need her fierce energy right now. I appreciate the vision and actions you put forth for us moving forward. Lisa, that means a tremendous amount. And as I just want to say, Om Shri Kali Ma, thank you so much back. My teacher, Susan Green, is somebody who's really impacted me, and her writing on the Kali practice and Kali as an image has actually had a really big influence on me. Do you think Biden picks a VP like Warren and runs on a few issues from Bernie's campaign, like Medicare for all and free college? Well, obviously not Medicare for all. That's something they've been really strong against, but has already talked about bankruptcy and free college. I don't think he'll actually pick Warren. I mean, Warren's a very weak politician and doesn't put much on the table in a general election, but she's obviously going to be in the mix. I think it will likely be Kamala Harris. Medicare for all is never going back in the barn. Absolutely. A Biden presidency will lead to Trump 2.0, someone who's actually competent, able to get us wars and Social Security cuts. I don't know. We can't make predictions like that. We have no idea. I mean, look, of course, I think the Biden presidency obviously it will be awful. It will be a failure. It'll be many things we need to fight. Less things that we need to fight simultaneously than a second Trump term. That we have to be real about. What that leads to next? Yes, absolutely. We've got Josh Hawley on the way. There's no doubt about it. But there's also many other historical events. We could have an entirely revitalized labor movement, which is the only way we're going to have a real, actual left in this country. That's the only way it's going to be manifested. And that is a core weakness. And that's why focusing on people like Chris Smalls right now, there's really nothing more important than that. If you had to make a prediction today, will Trump get reelected? Oh, Jesus, that is really hard. If I had to make a prediction today, would Trump get reelected? Oh, no, there's too much up in the air to make that prediction. Right as of this moment, if people voted right now, yes, I think Trump would get reelected. I think the trajectory we're on, there's enough objective damage that's happening that will start to filter out more into his base as this horrible virus moves across the country, where I think he's in deep trouble for reelection. As of right now, if people are voting today, yes, I think Donald Trump will be reelected. Very annoyed at wonky PMC colleagues and friends using politics as an opportunity for sophistication signaling, above all, intellectual masturbation about policy design, no understanding of power. That's a major problem. That's been a problem from the beginning. That was the core pathology of all of the Warren bullshit out of the gate. And this sort of obsession, I like how you put it. And that is why I really want to highlight the Lulas, the Pepe Mojicas, this serious understanding of power that's also linked with a humanity and a decency and an energy. That's what we need. And that's also that broad, real humanity driven working class politics. Can you push Shahid Buttar more? He needs to win. Oh, I've done a ton for Shahid, and I think that that's an incredibly important race. Um, Obviously. Can you do a nihilistic Bernie impression to cheer us up? Well, after a long consideration, it actually strikes me that a mass general strike might cause wealthy people even more physical discomfort than me winning more primaries. So, with my kink of wanting to punish wealth and success, that is the best way to move forward, in my opinion. Chance Biden won't physically make it to the nomination and Bernie becomes nominee. Well, definitely a chance Biden doesn't make it. But I would look at Gavin Newsom or Andrew Cuomo for the pinch hit. That's how I would see it. Uh, have any of your talks with Adolf Reed touched on the structural anti-Semitism in the Black community in regard to the South Carolina vote? No, and I don't buy that. I don't. Again, first of all, stop fetishizing, a specific aspect of one vote. I think that that's actually really important. The African American vote is an extraordinarily diverse vote, and there's voters of color who are to the right. you know that makes total sense. There's broad demographics like anywhere else, and South Carolina was always going to be a really tough state for Bernie. Period. I definitely do not see structural anti-Semitism in that sense as anything at all. Obviously, look, there's anti-Semitism that came at Bernie across the board, but not in that specific regard. Sorry if you guys already talked about this, but have you seen the list of major youth groups demanding cabinet positions? What do you think left is best? Uh, it depends if there's a viable threat behind it, right? But I haven't seen that letter. I saw Ryan Grimm tweeted it, but I do think that, again, this is the paradox now. You cannot win concessions without viable threats, and I don't think there's much politically to be carried out with a viable threat right now. I feel like I'm Brad Pitt, Bruce Willis, and 12 Monkeys right now. Solidarity forever, head home, pour one out for other Bernie, isolate and create. I like isolate and create, meditate, pray, reach out to friends and family, get some exercise, read some books. If you can, try to give yourself a little distance from it. So I just think that there is, this is a time, again, it's a paradox. There's a huge amount of action that needs to be taken. And there's a huge amount that needs to happen on a planetary level, on a survival level. And then conversely, we need to sit back and think. We need, sorry, Clay, if I skipped your chat. I missed it. Why don't you hit me and tell me what it was again? Not with a super chat, just message me. It's an honor system. I didn't see it, but I'm assuming I missed it. So just tell me what it is again. But we need to think through things. We need to seriously improve our analysis. The world needs a left that is competent, that is strategic, that is able to mount a strategy for actual power and mass appeal. And that doesn't exist right now. So that's what we need to work on. And it's going to require some thinking, and it's going to require some innovation, and it's going to require letting go of a lot of bad habits and bad ideas. And it's going to require courage, and it's going to require empathy, and it's going to require shrewdness. It's going to require that Machiavelli spirituality thing I'm talking about. What can the left win on now? 3 months, small goals, and improved marketing. I want us to see local wins and networking. Too many big plans. I think that, and I'm hopefully going to interview this guy, Michael Schumann, who focuses on local businesses and regional economies and sustainability. I think that there actually needs to be a serious left message about the importance of actual small and, of course, cooperative and worker owned businesses on local and regional scales, and how that fits with facing down the complete corporate monopoly, and then of course how that synchronizes with uh, the strikes and labor movements that are popping out right now. And I think that that is a very grounded way of linking the left into these really important local struggles and really grounded experiences for people. Reading material suggestion on understanding power. I'm reading this great book just called Strategy. It's a history of all different forms of strategy, from the primate world to the Greeks to the art of war. I think it's fascinating. I would read, different, guerrilla leaders you might be interested in. There's actually relevant tactics there, but I also read business management books. I try to dip into Gramsci's ideas on hegemony. Those are going to be relevant. I'd read memoirs of hack political consultants, but people who've actually, run and ran campaigns. We need to focus on that type of thing, like actual winning content. Can we revive the BPP or start a vanguard party, a full party, a blown socialist people's party, unapologetic, unwavering, plant our flags and stand strong? I mean, we're just not there yet. There isn't a constituency for that. I think that there might be some relevancy in actual second parties in one party dominant states. I think that that's really interesting, and I think it's worth exploring. But there isn't going to be, but creating another marginal third party isn't going to achieve anything either. So again, we got to be really strategic. I don't know the answers, other than I know that these things like these strikes are extraordinarily important. And framing things that are happening because of horrible necessity as actually being part of a collective action. Do you think public leftists regret supporting Joe Rogan now that he said he'd vote for Trump? Well, I don't even know what that means. Uh, in fact, for those of us who were excited about the Rogan endorsement, it simply proves our point about the appeal of Bernie in a general election. So no, and I'd watch the video we did on it. That's exactly the kind of politics we need to drop. Aside from the Supreme Court loss, I can't help thinking Biden presidency would set back Medicare for all and liberal goals 8 to 12 years compared to 4 with Trump. No, I don't think so. Again, you got to think of a right-wing project, a global right-wing neo-populist project that is infinitely more intelligent, infinitely better at getting power, has answers for the moment. Yes, read The Prince, absolutely. They are better. The right is infinitely better than the liberals and the third wayers. And the left is not even in full fighting shape yet. So if you let them consolidate power for decades, that is a major thing versus some mediocrity that limps through for 4 years. That definitely poses less of a threat if you're looking to, again, try to see if the left can be in some sort of shape. Neoliberalism is corporate fascism, and Bernie should have left the Democratic Party 30 years ago. Well, he did. He was never in the Democratic Party. Guys, we have over 1,000 viewers. You're all amazing. And if you haven't yet, you need to smash the like button. And most definitely, if you haven't yet, you need to click subscribe and go through all of our back content. I really have no doubt that there's a huge amount of material here that can at least help kind of frame where we're at today. And there's also a lot of examples of heroism that we talk about, including like the extraordinary courage of Caribbean leaders, like the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago right now, in pushing back against the Trump administration's belligerence, imperialism, and illegality in the Caribbean and against Venezuela. Warren Ellis, Schumann's books are a must-read. Laura Flanders interviewed him a couple years ago. Yes, and I'm going to be interviewing him soon too. I'd also check out Michelle Bowen's book, work at the Peer-to-Peer Foundation. There's some very interesting ideas, including about connecting dynamic localism with new means of technologies, the stuff that Aaron Bastani writes about. If you actually deployed 3D printing in a decentralized, democratized way to empower local communities to create their own medicines, to create their own supply chains, we would have a much more responsive, much more just, much more sane world. And these are the things we need to be talking about. And I'll also mention some people again, like Brent Cooper and Jeremy Johnson in the meta modern movement. So I think, these are all the different threads. And we move back and forth. Never despair, keep going. Yes, because we have no choice. We don't have the luxury of cynicism. We don't have the luxury of cynicism. And with regards to food and things like that, systems like community supported agriculture are extraordinarily important. Supporting small scale organic farmers actually fits into this broader political fight. It's really, really important. And we keep thinking on the three chains that they have to be connected, and we fight on different terrains. The most important thing, thank you, Denise, the most important thing, of course, last year was electing Bernie Sanders president. I wish that more people took that incredibly seriously from the beginning, because it was definitely not a time, it's not the time to fuck around with other candidates. It wasn't the time to fuck around with Elizabeth Warren or fuck around with Andrew Yang or fuck around with Tulsi Gabbard. It was a really serious moment. It was a time to focus on this unparalleled opportunity to actually try to generate a decent national social democracy in America, which is an absolute must. The Bernie Sanders agenda, single payer healthcare, things like this are an absolute necessity. Then on the other hand, there's of course the international dimension. How do we coordinate in a global way to take on capital that moves internationally, to improve labor internationally, to coordinate to solve common problems? And now we also have to look at the local dimension of vibrant economies, ecological diversity, and empowering communities so that they have the capacity to feed national politics and drive resurgent labor. Bernie's staying in all state ballots but won't campaign. How does that help? I don't mean to sound dumb. I think and thank you, Britt. I think it's just theoretically, giving people the option to vote, and then maybe it could give you some influence over the platform. I mean, look, I'll vote for him in New York, obviously. I don't think much of it one way or another. I am sure that the people who constantly whine about and smear and freak out about Bernie, this will be another thing for them to bitch and moan about, but it doesn't really matter. Um, Guys, watch Pepe Mujica. For patrons, we've been doing a lot of coverage of Jose Pepe Mujica in the post games. Really, really important political critique, and also some personal ethos that I think is really important for all of us to check out. If you haven't yet, smash the like button. If you haven't yet, definitely hit subscribe. Um, and definitely, if you have the capacity right now, it will really help us, because we got to keep everything going strong by becoming a patron. We will give everybody a deal who needs a deal. And if you're in a position to go at a higher rate, which some people have been doing, that of course helps subsidize and support everybody else. Which candidate should run in 2020 to hang on the progressive agenda? I can already see Pete, Kamala, Cuomo, and Warren running in 2024. I think you're right about those. Obviously, I would not vote for any of those candidates. I don't know who the person to take on it is. Maybe a Ro Khanna. I'm really not sure. I think we've got to focus now on these other fights: labor, localism, and congressional and state races. To lift my spirits, I hope the spirits of others. That picture of Durga or Kali Ma behind you, part of me wishes it was Durga, part of me wishes it was Kali Ma. God, does my heart hurt. I am so sorry. I get it. This fucking sucks. That is Kali Ma, and she's awesome. Burners in blue states should vote green to get them 5% national funding. We clearly need more pressure against the Democratic Party. Let's see, what else? How do you justify voting for an alleged sexual abuser with a history of being aggressive towards women? Uh, I mean, how do you justify voting for somebody who voted for the Iraq War or any number of other terrible things? I mean, because of political choices. That's how, you would make that calculation. Um, you know, it's thank you so much. But again, before we even get to those conversations, we need to get to the real material context we're in. They'll ask us to wait for change until we die. I think that's true. We need to focus on those local questions we're talking about. We talked last night about the strikes in with the Teamsters and with with Amazon. Those are key. Look, I just saw that. I won't respond to most people that aren't super chats, but it's not a question. Look, you can go and say you're a revolutionary all day. That doesn't mean a fucking thing. Being a revolutionary does not mean casting like a silly protest vote or something. What does that actually mean? Do I want fundamental change, like post capitalism, like get rid of this disgusting, grotesque leadership of both parties? 1,000,000% yes. 1,000,000% yes. How that is actually achieved in 2020 in an advanced capitalist, technologically driven, technologically ultra sophisticated society. Daniel Bester was making this point that when this kind of like LARPing fantasy stuff gets out of hand, Stalin could, before the Soviet Revolution, like rob a bank and then like get out of prison, escape, and rob more banks. That isn't happening to anyone today. What does that even mean? People on social media platforms, which are surveilled by everybody, talking about the revolution. This is what I mean. We can't escape to fantasy. We can't be in fantasy life. And if concretely you mean casting a meaningless protest vote, sure, that's fine. I'm not going to shame anybody for voting in any way. But it doesn't mean anything. And please God, don't think that that's revolutionary. I think the only thing that is actually potentially revolutionary in the sense of a fundamental change of the system that actually happens in reality, not just the story that we tell ourselves or whatever, is in the realm of these strikes. And it will be in the realm of getting on the streets for civil disobedience and things like that. I think that as well. That is actually where a vast majority of my attention is going to be. Not even in litigating this general election. I'll say what I think, I'll be clear about it, but there's no doubt that that realm of striking and organizing, and the local realm is profoundly important because that actually can create some capacity that people have more concrete power over their lives. So when I hear all this revolution stuff, I actually take that very seriously because we better have a serious change in this system, a different system. If you want to use it in that sense, then I'm revolutionary. But if revolutionary is just cosplay or just fantasy thinking or just an electoral protest vote that you want to put sexy language around, no, I'm not that. And it doesn't mean shit. You know, not to be offensive, but just to be clear. Because we got to be clear. We have to have a plan for this. And none of us know all the answers. And if there's a real plan and real ideas that aren't just slogans, I'll talk and I'll be extremely interested because where we're at is completely unacceptable. I know people who are dying right now. But I am not going to indulge in a fantasy life, whether it's a Warren fantasy life or whether it's a, revolution fantasy life. Thoughts on Nina to lead the left nationally, possibly run in 24. She's an outsider, most importantly, not worried about feelings and relationships. I love Nina Turner. I'm a big fan of Nina Turner. I held a red flag at a rally once. I'm such a cool revolutionary. I'm basically Mao Zedong 2.0. I'm going to start a cultural revolution with my flag. Exactly. And that stuff, again, the cosplay stuff does not matter. It doesn't matter. A true radical saves room for hope. I like that. And I get it. I totally get why people would go there because it's a completely sick, abominable situation. And it's totally unacceptable. And it does require revolutionary change. But simply sloganeering and whatever is not, it just isn't going to get us anywhere. What should the left do in November? I don't know yet. I will be thinking more about that moving forward. But again, I'm going to keep focusing on the strikes and the labor actions because this, to me, is the most important side of action right now. And I also won't be delusional about the threat of a second Trump term. You and Sam are the only pundits outside of Hitchens who have ever made the political discussion palatable to my dumb brain, so thank you. Would you take a job on MSNBC if it was offered to you? I hope not. Well, first of all, I'm sure you're not dumb. Uh, would I take a job on MSNBC if it was offered to me? That's a really good question. I would do absolutely nothing that would jeopardize TMBS, period. Case closed. So that's the really simple answer, that anything that undermined my ability to do this show first and foremost, I wouldn't take anywhere, period. Um, would I go on MSNBC and make a case? Absolutely. I'd go on Fox and make a case. I'd go anywhere and make a case. I think we should. I think we have to do what we can do, period. And media is absolutely not the most important part of this. The most important part of it is people like Chris Smalls or the Teamsters. But to the extent that we can play an ancillary role and a contributing role, we have an obligation to do everything we can. And an obligation to be honest with ourselves and each other. That's why I just can't indulge bullshit. That's why I want us to, improve. And that includes me, along with everybody else. Folks, I'll say it one more time. If you haven't yet, smash the like button. Definitely make sure you hit subscribe and get the bells. We're going to only do more and more work. I'm so proud of all of the work we do on the show, and definitely, particularly in some ways, the Patreon content, more of which we're unlocking. The two-part history of Samora Machel and the revolution in Mozambique through today is incredible. Advice to someone who's fairly new to political process on becoming policy-driven, rational voter. Well, I keep reading, keep watching stuff like this. I don't know about my frame is not being a policy-driven, rational voter. Because, on the policy level, it's really simple. You can just go and look at what policy is best, what's closest to you, and then vote that way. But I think there's bigger problems that we've got to get into. So I'd start looking at the power and ideological questions. That's why we're in where we're in. Thank you a million for this. Synthesis, a clear differentiation from woke left liberalism, morally clear socialist that speaks to normie political needs, a greater focus on obtaining and keeping power, not just intellectualizing the world. Love you, TMBS, and support left media. You just nailed it. That's the goal. And thanks a million. That's obviously huge support, which I'm totally humbled by. So guys, we'll be back on later tonight with the whole crew to talk about this. I'll be with Jacobin at 6. I think I'm actually going to do something with Nomiki pretty soon. I'm all over the place. Support progressive candidates with no party affiliation. Also, my GF won't vote for Biden. It's definitely not my place to tell her how to exactly. And I'm not doing that in this election cycle. I'll tell you what I think, but I'm not advocating the same way. Thank you for Michael for everything today. Thank you so much back. Thanks all of you. If you can, patreon.com/TMBS, patreon.com/TMBS. Hang in, guys. It will improve, and many amazing things are actually happening, even amongst all of this horribleness. And we have an obligation to not fully succumb to the luxury of cynicism. All right. Peace and love. Appreciate you all. Stay strong.